The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet.
As the Tattersalls Craven Breeze-Up sale approaches, let's check in with somebody who's enjoyed remarkable success over the last couple of years. He has had the top two lots in 2023 and 2024. Roderic Kavanagh of Glending Stables joins us to reflect on preparing Vandeek and also a Galileo who was sold for $1 million guineas. Roderic, you're very welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's an exciting time for everyone.
Yeah, very much so. You're getting to enjoy the sunshine, the nice blue skies, while we still have it here in Ireland. I guess my first question should be, Vandeek for 625,000 guineas, Royal Officer for $1 million guineas. How'd you do it?
Well, look, we were fortunate to land on two horses that were very capable and had the profiles. You know, you just needed the process. We were just lucky they performed on the day, and you know the right buyers turned up. And yeah, look, Vandeek ended up being good value. Much and all as he topped the sale, like, you know, he's been syndicated there at 50 grand a pop. So you know he's been great value. I think he was valued north of 8 million. You know, so he was robbed really from me. And then you get the flip side of the coin, and the Galileo colt didn't work out for whatever reason. And you know that it's tough. It's tough for us because you were hoping he was going to go on, but you know they're not robots, and sometimes things stop. You know, you see it with young sports stars, human athletes. You know, sometimes they just don't go on to realize their potential.
Well, take me back to the beginning with Vandeek. So you bought him as a yearling. He'd gone through the sales ring as a foal for 52,000. You get him for 42, and then you flip him for 625. So what was it that, did you think that he'd been undervalued by the market? What was it about him physically or mentally that you saw that attracted you to him?
Well, we were in the December yearling sale, which obviously is it's at the tail end of the season, and sometimes it's for horses that have had, you know, a mishap, or maybe they're little and they need the extra time. So it can be a bit of a, you know, a sale rail. People need out. They don't do the breeze-ups as such as ourselves. And, you know, it's obviously been really lucky for us. But it was a punt at the time. You know, we had good veterinary advice. He had a bang on a knee, but the structure underneath was A1. And, you know, some people were a bit nervous. But it wasn't rocket science. Like, Havana Grey was the leading first season sire, and he was an exceptional physical, if you could look beyond the bang on the knee, you know, which is why he missed book 2, where he might have made, you know, double that, and we wouldn't have been buying him at the time. Obviously, we've been able to elevate as a result of Vandeek and other results that we, you know, you could stretch now because it completely changed our horizon of what's possible. And
when you're buying a horse for that amount of money, obviously you're hoping it's going to work out. It's worked out brilliantly well. But the turnaround is just in the space of time of 4 months. So what goes into you preparing a horse for the Craven Breeze-Up sales?
Yeah, well, we've nothing from the December to Craven this year. We bought one horse and he goes to France, a later sale. But look, a fair bit of work goes in. Like, I'm really lucky with a great team here. Obviously, like, born into Kildare Stud, which our parents run a successful commercial stud farm here for a number of years. So, you know, we have an established team and facilities here, which is, you know, half the battle. A lot of people, you know, are renting places and they have to work out their facilities and how they operate, whereas we're lucky that we're kind of, you know, we have a system, and the system for the most part works, and you have to tweak it for individuals. But yeah, look, we get them home, they're broken. Vandeek was big and took a bit of pulling together in terms of getting him balanced and doing his flat work right. And once he had the basics right, like, you know, obviously he's an unbeaten 2-year-old, a champion. He always had the raw ability. It was just basically don't mess him up.
When you're dealing with a horse with a big engine like that, are they difficult to manage?
I suppose he's a lot of horse, but he was a gentleman, and he was a gentleman. And I think it is something that the Havana Greys get. You know, they turn. It's like turning the key in a car when you're, you know, at the bottom of a racetrack, and only the rest of the time they're just purring along. You know, some of them get very excitable about the job, and then when you actually give them a squeeze, there's no, you know, they don't deliver. But he was just one of those, you know, he did them, and other than that, he was very placid. He was a joy.
Internally, did you have a sense that this Breeze-Up was going to turn a few heads before it happened? And what was your reaction when he does go for that massive money?
Yeah, well, one bloodstock agent stopped me, and he was like, "Do you realize what you have there?" And like you know, and like I did, like I knew he went, but also you don't want to get too arrogant about it, or like I knew he'd gone quick, and Stuart Williams said, a week later, he said, this horse has won 190 horse maiden, which was the Breeze-Up, by it was like .4 of a second, which I think equated to like it was I think every .1 is a length or whatever of the distance. So he'd won 190 horse maiden by 4 lengths supposedly. But it's great that they go on then and keep doing that on the racetrack, because that's what it's all about, and hopefully we can put a few more to our hands that are as talented, and then people come down to you with a completely different mindset that a champion can come out of this place. They can nurture and produce something that can be that good.
Yeah, we were talking to Jason Singh from Tattersalls earlier on about the horses that have graduated, and it's an incredible success story. But the magic formula is trying to figure out this horse that's available at the sales or the Breeze-Ups. Are they actually going to be able to translate that to the training, to the track, not only as training racehorses? And I'm very intrigued as to how different is it between what you're doing with horses to graduate them to the sales, and then what a trainer does with a horse to get them to the racetrack. How different is that process?
I'd say it's not that different. Obviously, we have one race day to aim for, whereas a trainer could maybe, if there's a day where it's like that horse isn't quite right, we can back off. Whereas we probably don't have that luxury of, this horse might need a little bit more extra time. So you see some horses that go to the Breeze-Ups, and by the end of the Breeze-Ups, they need a holiday. It was too much for them, and I think sometimes just. It's like anything, when you have a horse that can compete or anything that can do that to that level, sometimes you get greedy and you want to see it again and again and again. And sometimes I think it's more and more about the confidence of it's there. It's just a case of not messing it up, and just they will deliver for you so long as you don't want to see it too often, basically.
We had Charlie Fellows on the show a year ago, and he gave some fascinating insight. And I'll try and be as succinct with this as I can be, but also paraphrase what he was saying. Essentially, there was a Sioux Nation that he thought there was just going to be no chance of getting him because everybody was talking about him. He thought he was going to go for crazy money. He leaves. He ends up getting the horse for significantly less than he thought, and the horse turns out to be quite good, wins first time out. But he was also saying what a bloodbath it was. Yeah, but he was also saying what a bloodbath it was, that there were so many horses there that looked like, oh, this is gonna go for a fortune, and it just didn't quite work out. So when you've put in all of that work and the investment as well, the financial investment that you've put into it, and you manage to get the rewards in what can be a very volatile market, that was the one in France, how rewarding is that for you? But also, is it nerve-wracking when you're sending horses there and you're not entirely certain how it's going to go?
Yeah, well, I think for the most part, the real skill, obviously we're getting them there, but the real skill of a lot of it is being able to pick out the horses with ability, and some of them aren't the fastest. Like obviously Vandeek was the fastest or whatever in the sale, and that's simple identify. But there's a lot of horses there that it didn't quite happen for on whatever day, and they can improve. They or they weren't at their ultimate on the day, or they're bred for a bit further distance, and being able to pick out those horses is really the skill. And I suppose like last year was tough. Like we, much and all as we had a great sale last year, we were fully aware as to how difficult it was in places. And even this year, you think you have a good bunch, and I'm already a bit nervous about, God, how are we going to put this bunch together again? And that's about this year's bunch that hasn't even sold yet. I know that sounds arrogant, like it's going to happen, but I'm already nervous, being like, wow, how are we going to put these together? Like there's, in most places we have things that'll fit, and it is nerve wracking trying to put those beast together, be it the stallion, the pedigree, the physical, and then at the end of it all, the ability.
Yeah, and then you're hoping that people can see what you can see as well.
But in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah, very much so. Do you think that buyers are a little bit more willing to forgive a soft yearling price for a horse that then is showing elite Breeze-Up talent?
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's gone definitely more performance based, like sure, every trainer has, not every trainer, but trainers do have well-bred horses, lesser bred horses, and ultimately the one that you really get excited about in the mornings are the ones that can perform. If someone has gone and paid below average figure for a yearling, and it turns out it can gallop, they're going to be just glad to have it and want to be they're going to do their best to get their hands on it. I think the ultimate of any person going to a sale is they want to buy the best horse they can for the smallest amount of money. That's the ultimate. And trying to just, then there are people that the price doesn't really matter and they will kick on until they try to get the horse. And, that's when it really clicks.
Another horse I wanted to talk to you about is one you were involved with through Kildare Stud that you mentioned earlier on, and that's Native Trail. Yeah. You were involved in preparing him. He goes on to become European Champion Juvenile, Classic winner, multiple Group 1 winner for Charlie Appleby and Godolphins. Obviously, they came back to you for the Galileo Colt last year that didn't quite work out, but I'm sure they'll be back again given the success with Native Trail. Were there any comparisons between him and Vandeek, and what was it like to be involved with a horse that then goes on to such incredible talent on the track?
Yeah, well, they were both big, sizable horses. The Native Trail, who was, we would have called him the Oasis Dream Colt that Dad had bought in France. We went to book one, and he was a big, heavy, I suppose. We're using them here as a stallion now. Like it's exciting having mares going to Vandeek, mares going to Native Trail, and foals here by Native Trail, and he seems to be getting good stock. Like we're hopefully looking to buy a breeding right. I think it's in the process, but they weren't too similar, I suppose. One horse was kind of fine and electric, and the other horse was just a resolute galloper. I think that's what Native Trail was he just got into top gear and no one could live with it. But I suppose he quickened away from horses in Group 1s, but physically you wouldn't have matched them up. Like Vandeek was much finer, more athletic, and the Native Trail was much more bone, much more solid, and a real grinder. But I remember when I went to see him at at the Curragh running as a 2-year-old, and I was like, how did we not capitalize on him as a yearling? And we had a little bit of veterinary advice. It just cast a bit of a shadow of doubt in our minds. And then Norman Williamson obviously came in, very talented guy, and he was like, what's going on here? I said, look, we got advice. It's your call. And he was like, he kind of looked to me for reassurance, like, fine with the horse. And I said, look, he preps and trains every day, and he's A1. So that's all I can tell you. But we've had advice that, he might take a little bit of time with a small little thing. And he took the punt, and he was brave, and he got the reward, and ultimately Godolphin did.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, he was an incredible success story. I know you can't even argue that he didn't go on at 3 because he's a classic winner. He didn't go on quite at 4, but that's not the horse's fault. And what he did as a juvenile, I mean, the National Stakes performance alone was just the Vincent O'Brien National Stakes performance. That was stunning that day. It was almost Pinatubu-esque. I think the most impressive performance I've seen on a racecourse from a juvenile, as in person, is Pinatubu blowing that race apart. But what he did that day was really quite special. I just wonder from your own perspective of somebody who's been involved in preparing these horses at a very young and early stage in their development, you're obviously going to be keeping an eye on what they're doing on the track because it's good for your CV when they succeed. But what does it mean to you from an emotional aspect when you're seeing Vandeek be an unbeaten juvenile and a dual Group 1 winner, when you're seeing Native Trail become European Champion Juvenile? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive. Well, like, as in, it just kind of, it believe and dream that, every day you go out, you don't know what you're dealing with. You hope, like, and the possibility of them being a champion is a possibility. From the ground up here, you're always like, that's the goal. And then when they go and realize it, like, we were obviously over at the yearling sales when Vandeek won the Middle Park, and I still maintain to this day, the Dewhurst was 2 weeks later against City of Troy, and I said at the time, I was like, look, you won't have another opportunity to have a shot at him. Like, why not? And the Christophers looked after him for the 3-year-old campaign, which he probably just never quite reappeared in the same vein of form. And like, I know I'm biased, obviously, but I would have loved to have seen him take on City and Troy. It would have really found out. It would have been an unbelievable match race.
Do you think you could have beaten him?
I like to think so, but as I said, I'm biased. Well, look, City of Troy turned up the following year and, disappointed on the track. Like, I know he looked fairly unbeatable as a 2-year-old. Look, that's big fighting talk, but it would have been interesting anyway.
My jaw was on the floor when City of Troy won the Superlative Stakes at Newmarket. Because I remember thinking, Aidan O'Brien doesn't run good horses in this race. Like, this guy can't be that good. I know the rumor was out that this guy's a machine. It was like, they can't be that good. Absolute monster. I would have loved to have seen that clash, by the way, but I genuinely couldn't call which of the two would have come out on top. because Vandeek was
it sounds like you're in the city of Troy.
I'm in the city of Troy camp. I'll come out of it. He'd have murdered him. But no, Vandeek was a superstar 2-year-old, and he had the speed. I think the city of Troy just had that relentless gallop.
But I don't know. I just feel like City of Troy as a 2-year-old, if you had something that had that speed up to eyeball him, he could have just cracked him, with the raw speed, and maybe Vandeek wouldn't have need to seen out the 7 as well. But anyway, look, hearsay.
Put it this way: City of Troy was in a different league to River Tiber.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Vandeek he left River Tiber for dead. So
yeah, he killed him. He absolutely and River Tiber at the time.
I shouldn't be saying that. We're sending a mare to him, I think.
River Tiber.
Yeah, exactly,
Superstar stallion, brilliant juvenile, absolutely brilliant. And you can send your mare to Cool Morston now.
Sent to France for a reason.
Nice save there, by the way. Very nice save. Just from the point of view of hindsight, with the pinhooking aspect of Vandeek, does that go down as just one of the best pinhooking situations you've ever been involved with?
Oh, definitely, yeah. No, no, it was amazing. It just all fell together. But we just got really lucky that on the day, he became available, and look, it was a gamble as well. Like what you were seeing in front of you with your naked eye was like, God Almighty, will he be okay on those? And we just had good veterinary advice, and in fairness, it just worked out, and he just happened to be super talented. And it was amazing. It's been a great launch pad for us, and hopefully we can try and find another one.
Well, you've had the top lot for the last 2 years. Are you going to manage to do that again? You've got 5 horses: a Havana Grey, a Without Parole, Hello Yumzane, a Kodiak, and an Omaha Beach. Tell me about them.
Yeah, look, I have a lovely bunch, but I think it's an exceptional catalogue. Like, it is really strong, and a lot of people have been very brave, but they've outbid some of the potential purchasers next week to buy them as yearlings. So, to say you're going to go anywhere near the top of it is just foolhardy. I've 2 fillies that I think go really well. Havana Grey filly, she's quite like him on the day I bought her because she was very similar physically to him, and her homework, it sounds ridiculous, has been like on a par anyway. Like, we don't do clocks or anything here, but just visually it's been very good. So hopefully, I'm hoping she's going to show up well.
She's out of the showcasing mare, isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, she's out of a sister to Mayland C, who's a very good ammo racing Havana Grey. Look, she's a lovely looking filly, and same mentality as Vandeek, and she really puts it in. So look, hopefully she still has to turn up on the day, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through yet, but I like her anyway. And I have a Kodiak filly that, real sharp early Kodiak, out and out. It's actually a small crop of Kodiaks. There's not many of them around, and she's a joy to have around. Really enjoys her game.
I was looking at her today. She's out of a Footsteps in the Sand mare who won an Italian listed race over 7.
That's right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Wanna cry. But no, she really enjoys it, and she doesn't take much imagination. She's hopefully Royal Ascot 2-year-old. Or that's what she looks like if she's that good. And then colts wise, but like the Hello Yumzane, his brother was 3rd in the Prix Jabel Guineas trial in France the other day. He's won a listed race since the catalogue went to print. Hello Yumzane's a very exciting young sire.
Yeah.
And he's a lovely strong horse. He's probably as expensive a yearling as we bought. He was €87,000 in France. He goes well. The American horse is by Omaha Beach, who's a stallion going very well in America, and he's a super stylish sort of horse. He's probably not out and out blistering speed, like in stateside they'd be calling him. Maybe he'll need at least a turn. He could go 2 turn. Thankfully, our tariffs have been postponed, whether they ever happen at all. But no, he's a lovely horse, and he'll really enjoy the fast ground next week, which is inevitable, really, with the dry spell we've had. And then
He's a beautiful horse.
Yeah, I kind of cry. Yeah, exactly. Would you believe I actually bought him from America, and I only realized the other day that I was putting my hand through his tail, and I was like, "What the hell is that? He's got knots in his." These are extensions. The horse I bought a horse with a fake tail in America, but they're still there.
Can
They're
you
still there.
can you explain that just for those who don't know?
Well, I suppose maybe he had his tail chewed, like, maybe horses that had lack of grass in a paddock, kind of with boredom, they just chewed on a tail, and all of a sudden he has only half a real tail, half like girls' extensions in his hair. So
Poor fella.
yeah, poor fella. But they're amazingly well done. Like, it's taken us 4 months to notice, and I was like, God, should I redo these? And I was like, well, if it's taking me that long to notice, bar one of the leading purchasers coming up next week running their fingers through it, I'd say we're okay.
Okay, until now. Now everyone knows.
Yeah, exactly. Or they're hearing it. Yeah.
Come on, Roderic. Giving the game away. Omaha Beach, though, to be fair, just prepping for this interview earlier on today, obviously he's a top-class US performer, but Richard Mandela's got an Omaha Beach filly who's 3 from 5, including her last 2, and that horse looks really, really stylish. His progeny are going very, very well.
Yeah, no, he looks really good. Look, I wouldn't be as up to speed. Like, I go over to Keeneland every year to buy yearlings, and I have a rough idea. But I've even mentioned, some people have asked me, "How's your Omaha Beach go?" He's a very exciting sire, and I'm nearly going on that. Like, I think he's going really well. And look, this colt is lovely, and he's, as I said, he's going to enjoy the ground next week. So hopefully he shows up well. There's been, in fairness, for this year's Breeze-Up sales, there's been more enthusiasm and visits from potential purchasers already. And a lot of them are buying for, the Middle East of Dubai and Saudi. So, it seems like there's good appetite around. It is exciting. But my last horse in the sale is a without parole colt who's he's more stamina laden. The Craven is usually fast speedsters, but there's actually a lack of kind of, milers, mile plusers in the sale. So I hope he'll be unique that way. And yeah, no, he's a lovely horse that's not going to break any speed limits, but he's a nice addition to some trainer's yard.
I got without parole badly wrong. I was there at Royal Ascot when he won the St. James's Palace Stakes. So I think it was all over Gustav Klimt, if I remember correctly. Wouldn't hear of defeat for him, but he was a really top class horse for the Goslings. Just briefly on that conversation about, or that point I should say, about stamina. Do you think there's too much of an emphasis on precocious speed in breeding in Europe and not enough in what the Japanese are doing, and then having that fantastic global success with middle distance horses?
Yeah, there probably is. But everybody's probably learned commercially in the ring, much and all as everyone wants the speed. They also realize once you put a saddle on their backs, and if they're not a Vandeek, a lot of them are kind of worth considerably less. Like I said, in the Middle East, a lot of those races are 6 and above, and let's say Australia, all those export markets. So people have kind of learned, much and all as speed is great, unless you're good speed. You're probably safer being, like if you're 80 rated over a mile and a quarter, you're probably worth double what a 95 rated sprinter is, which, kind of, but people are copping onto it, and breeding with a bit more of a view than just the result.
Which horse are you most looking forward to seeing in action next week? Is that a very unfair question to ask you? But which one are you most looking forward to seeing?
I probably already answered it. Like, the Havana Grey filly, I think she's going to be. She's going to be exciting for me anyway, and it'll be exciting in the wrong direction if it doesn't happen. So, all of her homework's been very good. I'd say she's probably the one to take out of next week.
Well, these are all potentially future winners, so we're going to be keeping an eye on them. Please God, touch wood, on the Final Furlong podcast in terms of their careers on track, but also very much keeping an eye on how they go in the sales ring at the Tattersalls Breeze-Up sale next week. The very best of luck to you, Roderic. You've had the top lot for the last 2 years. Hopefully, you'll pull it off for the 3rd year in a row. Best of luck.
Yeah, that'll be dreaming, but no, looking forward to it anyway. Thanks for having me, Emmett.
Great to once again be joined by Jason Singh, Associate Director of Marketing at Tattersalls, Europe's premier auction house and home of the Craven Breeze-Up sale. As we approach this year's renewal, we'll preview standout lots, discuss the sale's remarkable graduates, think Vandeek, Native Trail, now Believing as well, big winner in Dubai, and explore how shifting global economics, including Trump's newly introduced tariffs, could impact bloodstock trade. You didn't think we'd be talking about that, did you? Jason's insights come at a pivotal moment for buyers, sellers, and the future of transatlantic sales. And Jason, always a pleasure to welcome you back to the Final Furlong.
Thank you, Emmett. Great to be back. Thanks for having me on.
So we're only days away from the Craven Breeze-Up sale. What is the mood like at Park Paddocks right now?
Yeah, I think excitement. We all. It's kind of, even though we sort of kick things off for the year in February with the February sale, this feels a little bit more like the start of the flat. You know, you've got the Greenham on tomorrow. You've got the Craven meeting next week. I think anybody who's a racing fan is just excited to have the flat back and the classics not far around the corner, and the Tattersalls Craven Breeze-Up sale is sort of part of the calendar at this time of year, and it's become an increasingly important sale over the last few years, and so a bit of an indicator as to where everything is after what was a bit of a bonkers end of 2024.
Yeah, it certainly was. We'll be covering the Craven meeting on TalkSport 2 next week as well, which I'm looking forward to. What has the pre-sale interest been like compared to previous years?
It is always one of those sales that can be a little bit difficult to get a read on, just because there's so few number of horses in the catalogue. But I've been on my travels, the rest of the team have been on their travels, and we've had some good feedback. We've got a good number of people booked into hotel rooms, and also expect quite a good domestic turnout. So, and why wouldn't you, after the sort of the success the sale has had over the last couple of years? So, yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Just touching on that success, staggering amount of Group 1 winners recently. Vandeek last year, Believing, Native Trail, Cachet. What do you think it is about this specific sale that makes it so consistently elite?
It is, I mean, the quality of the horse here is fully dependent on what the vendors bring here. That's the most important thing. If the vendors bring us good horses, then our job's to sell them well, and that will hopefully then be reflected on what they do on the race course. But it is a remarkable honours list over the last, I think since 2022, we've had 5 individual Group 1 winners. The 4 you mentioned, the only one you left off there was Hot as Hell, who of course won the Futurity. And
how did I leave out an Irish horse? How did I leave out an Irish horse, Jason? That's insane.
Looks to be going for the French 2,000 guineas, I think, is the choice at this point. And I mean, great that Believe. I mean, she was definitely deserving of a Group 1 win. She was placed in 5 Group 1 races last year or the year before, the last 2 years, and great to see her salute in the Elquell Stakes. And the thing when it's sort of coming up, looking at the list of the horses, the thing that really sort of jumped out at me is how viable they all were. Cachet cost 60,000 guineas. Believing was 115,000 guineas. Both of them bought by Highclere. Jake Warren doing a great job for them there. Native Trail 210. Hot as Hell 200. The only one that really was pricey was Vandeek at 625,000, but probably worth it in the end. Well, undoubtedly worth it in the end. So, they're all prices that you or me might not be able to afford. Well, you might be, Emmett, but very, very in the grand scheme of things, very affordable. And also, the thing I thought, which is remarkable, is all proper Group 1 winners. 2 classic winners there. There could be a third. Mixing it with the best in Britain and Ireland. These are the races that really matter. And so, 5 outstanding individuals. But then I haven't been the only ones. There were coming up, looking at all the different graduates. 31 individual group or list of winners since 2022. So it's a great number. And plenty of others there that were Group 1 placed as well. You look at Ambiente in the Derby last year. He only cost 80,000 guineas at the sale the year before. American Sonia, who was third in the Prix-Jean Romanet, only cost 95,000 guineas. Spycatcher, who was placed in 2 Group 1s, only cost 90,000 guineas. So definitely an affordable sale.
Yeah, certainly in the context of flat racing, where horses are going for millions, and yet these ones are graduating and actually producing the goods on the track as well. Is there any for this year's catalogue? Again, we're only a few days away, but are there any standout lots or pedigrees that are really generating buzz for you individually, but also around the area?
Well, I think so. Rather than sort of, so much of these things depend on, I guess, how the horses breathe and the sire power as well. There's some nice pedigrees in there, but the sire power really caught my eye. I did a list of some of the interesting ones that I'll bore you with here. 9 Blue Points. Obviously, courtesy of Rosalian last year, we saw what a good stallion he was or is, and Big Evs, obviously. There are 3 2-year-olds by Candy Ride, who was, it needs no introduction, Candy Ride, but just to remind everybody, had Hit Show, who won the Dubai World Cup last weekend. Dubai, Justified, Kingman are all represented. Havana Grey, it's got 13 2-year-olds in the catalogue. He's the sire, obviously, of Vandeek, but also of Arabian Dusk, who was bought at the sale last year. Memas, is there a stallion going better at the moment than Memas? 10 2-year-olds catalogue. He's the sire of Believing, but also he had 3 individual Group 1 winners last year. He had Scorthy Champ, Vertical Blue, and I guess make sure I've got the whole name right, the Breeders' Cup winner, I think Magnum Force, maybe, for chair. Can't be going better. Night of Thunder's got 4 2-year-olds in the catalogue. He's, kicking plenty of goals at the moment, as is No Name Never, who's got 6. Sioux Nation, 11. Starman, I'm not sure how many runners he's had, but that first runner he had, Lady Iman, looked very smart at Dundalk the other night. He's got 7 catalogued. 2 Done Hot. Is there if there is a hotter stallion than Memas, it might be 2 Done Hot, who's hot in all hemispheres at the moment. He's got 8 catalogued. He, of course, is the sire of Hot as Hell, who was the Group 1 winner out of last year's catalogue, and also Fallen Angel, the classic winner. And last but not least, Wooten Bassett. I'm probably doing a disservice to him by calling the others the hottest stallions around at the moment. He had 10 2-year-old Group winners in 2024, and he has 3 2-year-olds catalogued. So it's a really good list of horses. So we're optimistic that buyers will find something there that appeals to them, hopefully.
From memory, when we spoke this time last year, I don't think there were any Justifies at the sale, and you mentioned he does have one or 2 this year. How many are going to be available?
He's got 1 colt. Kingman's got 1 filly, and Dubawi's got 1 colt. So yeah.
It's just interesting, given the fact that he's a North American-based stallion, and obviously there's going to be a massive amount of interest in him after Opera Singer, but particularly City of Troy. So you would imagine there's going to be a bit of a demand for a rare...
No question that he's a...
Yeah, John Magner told us all. He told us all a few years ago. Did we listen? Did we invest? Sorry, John.
I know.
What kind of buyer profile are you expecting this year? And are we looking at any strong US presence given the current headwinds?
No, there's always been a limit. The US influence on not only the Craven Breeze-Up sale, but also the Breeze-Ups in general in Europe is often more from a vendor point of view than from a purchaser point of view. The Breeze-Up boys always like to pop over the pond to the US to buy some US bred horses, whether they're turf or dirt horses, to offer at the Breeze-Ups here. We've got, I think, in the region of 32-year-olds that have got a USA suffix on them. They tend to be popular with buyers from the Middle East. We've got buyers coming in from Dubai, from Saudi, from Bahrain. Obviously, there is some dirt racing in both Dubai and Saudi, and so as well as Qatar. So they tend to be with buyers from those countries. So don't expect that to be any different this time.
Okay, and a horse is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. So that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. I would be interested in your thoughts on Trump and the current tariff situation. You've gone on record in the Racing Post saying that Tattersalls is maintaining a watching brief on the new US tariffs. What are your biggest concerns from a sales and export perspective?
I mean, that was a sitting on the fence comment, and our view is that it's difficult to have anything more than that at the moment, just because it's difficult to know where this is all going, and we've seen with the changes that happened yesterday or the day before that just reversed a lot of those tariffs. That, I mean, if you can predict exactly how this is all going to play out over the next few months, you're a smarter man than me. So it is. Look, I don't think those sort of measures be good for anybody, but it is. I mean, one of the things we've learned with the market here, we have buyers throughout the year through all of the sales from more than 50 different countries, and looking at a sale, for example, like the horses in training sale, one of the things that's become very evident to me over the last couple of decades here is that when one country might run into headwinds or might not be able to sort of compete, another country tends to pop up. So opportunity, where opportunity closes in one sense, it opens in another. So who's to know where we're going to be later in the year? But if there are tariffs in place, and there's every reason to believe that they could be reciprocal if they exist. Predicting who's going to be able to go where to buy what and how much of an effect that's going to have, that is the question. I mean, there's no doubt that European bloodstock has become very popular with Americans who want to own a turf horse in the States. The quality on offer from Europe is just simply higher. That's why they came en masse to book one of the Tattersalls October yearling sale, because they are the best yearlings that are available on the market, and certainly the best turf yearlings that are available anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. So, yeah, if there's a tariff on those, which remains to be seen if there is, I think the thing that it might change is knock a bit off what people are maybe willing to pay. But who's to know?
An eloquent answer, by the way. It's just interesting speaking to publicans and hoteliers in Ireland about how tourism has plummeted. Now, perhaps that will change between now and the end of the year, but at the moment, particularly North American tourism, significantly down. But hopefully that will improve, because Ireland heavily relies on that, massively so. And obviously we'll be relying on American investment in horse racing as well, for that matter. Just more broadly, how resilient do you believe the European bloodstock market is to geopolitical shocks and changes like that?
Well, it is one thing I've learned over the last 2 decades, and I've been here since 2000, is that it is trying to. There's been more than one occasion where I've tried to predict where I think the market's going, and it can make you look a bit foolish. And there was no better example of that than the yearling sales at Tattersalls here in Newmarket last year. Leading into it, there was quite a lot of doom and gloom. We were slightly more optimistic, but the sales in all of our major competitors had all been down a little bit, and we ended up with a sale that just blew things out of all expectations. So it is. I think there's a degree of resiliency, to answer your question, but look, nobody likes to see stock markets dropping in value. The bottom line is if someone's feeling poorer, and it doesn't have to be a millionaire, it can be someone who 10% share in a 20 grand racehorse, and if that person's got a little bit less money or feels like they do, that has the potential to affect our industry. But equally, if they're feeling like they've got a little bit more to spend or they fancy spending it, then that can have a positive effect on their industry. So those sort of stock market uncertainty, I don't think helps anybody either. But hopefully we'll have things a little bit calmer by the time the autumn comes around.
Yes, steadier waters, calmer waters, please, between now and then, hopefully. Finally, Jason, what's your long-term outlook for the Breeze-Up model? Has its success changed buyers' perceptions for good?
It is. I don't think there's any question now that the Breeze-Ups are a success. I mean, you only have to look at the number of what we just talked about, the Group 1 winners over the years. There's more now than there's ever been. You've still got people who don't seem to like them, which, look, each to their own, but just looking at, I mean, if you actually compare the prices with yearlings and the success, I did this a couple of years ago. I sort of compared what you had to pay for a stakes horse in the Breeze-Ups and stakes horse and yearling. It's similar. The strike rate of winners to runners is similar. So all those things, I think a lot of the myths about Breeze-Up horses have been debunked. So I think people really should, go to the Breeze-Up sales with confidence because the success speaks for itself.
Well, speaking to Louis Stewart on TalkSport 2 today, by the sounds of things, Ruling Court is absolutely storming up the gallops at Charlie Appleby's yard. And if he goes and wins the 2,000 guineas, that's further evidence that the Breeze-Ups are very much the place to be going. The Craven Breeze-Up sale begins 15th of April, runs right through until the 16th. Jason Singh from Tattersalls, thanks so much for your time, your company, and your insight once again.
Always a pleasure, Emmett. Thanks for having me on.
The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet.